So thank you for coming, everybody. Welcome to Trauma-Informed Compassionate Leadership, powered by Self-Compassion. This presentation is presented by volunteers from the Fraser Health Physician Wellness Committee. And there's also members of the Surrey North Delta Division of Family Practice involved there, and also the Fraser Health Bioethics and Diversity Services Group. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. The breakout rooms will not be. Sujatha, I'd like to pass it to you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Please join me in a moment of gratitude for the unceded land that we live, work, and play on. May we consider how we might each shift to advocate for and to build authentic, kind, equitable, and safe relationships with all people, and namely the Indigenous people of our province. So some housekeeping. Please mute yourself when not speaking to reduce unintentional audio feedback. Consider keeping your camera on, just it keeps us connected. If someone shares something personal, please assume it's sensitive information to them unless they express otherwise explicitly to you. And the MRI rule, take the most respectful interpretation of what is shared, and spelling doesn't count in the chat box.
Tonight, we will be discussing the topic of trauma and trauma triggers. And trauma triggers can be different for different people. We can't predict what might trigger other people. But if you do feel like you require support, please know that we are here to support you today. My cell phone number is on the screen there, 778-877-4283. For anybody who might be requiring support during or after this presentation. And feel free to message anytime or call. For the physicians on this line, there is the Physician Health Hotline, 1-800-663-6729. And their services have improved vastly and significantly over the past few years. This is a loose agenda. Please hold it lightly. We'll be discussing topics like unconscious bias, our harsh inner critics, health systems trauma, emotional contagions, self-compassion and compassionate leadership. We'll have some breakouts and we'll do an action plan. So
shall I start introductions?
Well, how about I introduce you first?
Sure.
So Sujatha is one of our courageous volunteers here today, and she's a community-based family physician in Surrey. She's a board member at the Surrey North Delta Division of Family Practice, and she's a co-chair of the Physician Wellness Committee in Surrey North Delta. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks. And Dr. Lawrence Yang, he is a family doctor in Surrey, chair of the Surrey Memorial Health Wellness Committee, QI coach, peer mentor with Practice Support Program, Doctors of BC rep for Psychological Safety Working Group. We also have Alan Alvarez, an ethicist with Fraser Health Ethics and Diversity Services. He has a quote that he talks about, and he says, and I quote, "My job is about values that apply to healthcare. It goes beyond the golden rule and asks how individual patients want to be treated versus how we as health professionals might want to be treated." And then next slide. We also have Josephine Agudo. She's helping us tonight also volunteer with our infrastructure background of using Zoom. So we thank her so very much. She's a nurse educator with long-term care team at Vancouver Coastal, and a DJ.
Now, Josephine, thanks so much for volunteering to work with us today. If you can, please run our first poll. Go ahead and take a minute to go through the poll. The poll will be closing in about 15 seconds, and we'll take a look at the results together. Go ahead and close the poll, Josephina. Let's see the results. So we have 80% physicians, 20% executives or administrative. There are people from Vancouver, Surrey, Burnaby, Maple Ridge. Welcome, welcome. Trauma informed care, the majority of us have some awareness of it. And there's quite a bit of awareness around compassionate leadership concepts and verbalizing what self-compassion might be. So it looks like we're having a lot of peer discussions on a topic we're all interested in today already. Energy levels. Most of us are about a 7 out of 10, 40%. And we have a few at the 5 and 6 and 8. Hopefully that will go up throughout this today. Thanks, Josephine. Close the poll. Sujata?
Sure. As an icebreaker, we invite you to help bridge our silos. You'll be randomly paired and placed into a breakout room to discuss what's the next fun thing you're going to do once you feel comfortable enough amidst social reopening. You'll have about 2 minutes each, so about 4 minutes, and we'll be brought back together, okay?
So look for that join button to join your paired breakouts.
Hi, Dr. Ken. Hello. We are just sending everyone to breakout rooms at the moment. I'll just be sending you off to a room. And we're just getting to know each other, so, all right. Okay, so you should get a prompt to join a room.
Yeah, I did, but when I went there, there was only me, so I came
Oh, there
back.
was only you. Okay. Let me see if I can send you over to breakout room number 5. All right. Did it? There we go.
Josephine, I was just going to ask, are we still recording? So did we have some new people join us since that little break?
Yes, we did. We had Sharina and Nicola McPherson.
Okay, welcome Sharina and Nicola. So we just finished a little breakout where we got to know each other. So if you didn't get to have a chance to be in the breakout, please go ahead and type into the chat box your role in the health system and one thing you're looking forward to doing once you feel that the pandemic's allowing you to. So mine was, I'm going to take my first RV trip with my family. I purchased an RV for $10,000 on Facebook Marketplace. last year, and really excited about driving to Medicine Hat with my kids and wife. Share in the chat box. Yes, Manju is going to be traveling. That'll be really exciting. Sujatha, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was with Laura. We were talking about, well, she has a girl group, and it sounds I might have to join in. It sounds like she has this really great bucket list, and she's been quite active since some of the restrictions have lifted. So yeah, we're just traveling and trying to enjoy what BC has to offer, it sounds like.
Very nice, cool. All right, I'm gonna go back to sharing the slides. Some of the references for the material we'll be discussing today are psychiatrist Daniel Siegel's work on the window of tolerance. We'll be discussing Dr. Neff's work on self-compassion, Maya Angelou on self-compassion as well, the King's Fund out of the UK, and Dr. Erica Chang from, I believe she's from Bella Coola, and some of her work in her program called Beyond the Cycle of Trauma. Sujatha, what would you like to tell us about unconscious bias?
Sure. So briefly before we kind of get started, I'd like to start a reflection about compassionate leadership by delving into the topic of biases. So from our personal experiences to organizational culture, biases are embedded in our everyday lives. Many of our biases are unconscious. Some call these biases the hidden curriculum in certain organizations. We must also reflect on biases we have towards ourselves. Recognizing and disrupting these biases are an important key to unlocking compassionate leadership within oneself. More recently, unconscious bias training has emerged. It attempts to raise awareness in participants in a blame-free manner to address equity in the workplace and other environments. So for instance, I know that the Doctors of BC, they're starting to implement this in some of the leadership roles. And I think that's it's kind of neat. And then they're wanting to bring it down to kind of everybody in the organization. So it's something that they're trying to use to create recognition about what we perceive and how we perceive ourselves. So I think it's a great start. So now for a little exercise. I'd like to invite everyone to bring to mind an event when things did not go the way you planned. What were you saying to yourself? If you can, please don't be shy. Type your self-talk into the chat box. Yeah, I'm just going to read a couple of them. I know that we can see them, but you know, I should have done X. What did I do wrong? Stupid. Kid. Okay, next slide. Okay, now what if this happened to a friend? What would you say to them then? Again, if you don't mind sharing in the chat box, again, what now if it was your friend? What would you be telling them about the same situation? Okay, nice. So yeah, it looks like you're human, you did your best. That's tough. You did your best. Yeah, a lot of kindness. That's what I'm seeing. I'd like us to pause and reflect about what we said to ourselves and what we said to our friend. Sounds like we're a lot kinder to others than ourselves. I'll do the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the foundation of compassionate leadership is self-compassion. Self-compassion practice involves mindfully and fiercely standing up to our harsh inner critics, as we just experienced. With mindfulness, we can separate this critical voice from reality. We can bring to mind our common humanity. We can bring to mind a fiercely compassionate response towards this harsh inner critic. And all this brings us back to loving kindness towards the self.
One of the paradoxes about leadership is that to be a courageous, compassionate leader, we're often required to become actually quite vulnerable, kind of unshielding of our hearts. And indeed, the most inspiring leaders that I've known in healthcare, including my site medical director who recently finished their term and stepped down, they've been really courageous at showing their heart and their vulnerability, courageously asking us for help, those of us who aren't the formal leaders. And they've been courageous and mindful and really heartful in their leadership. And it's been really massively engaging and effective in inspiring us to lean in to our own leadership and to continue doing the good work that we do. I think even in a small clinic, there's no way that any of us can lead on our own. Leadership is about, I think, sharing power. It's about giving power in a courageous manner. Those of you who know me from social media might know my outlier skill. Like, we all have different outlier skills, and type yours in the chat box, what yours might be. Those of you who follow me on social media, do you guys know what my outlier skill might be? Go ahead and shout it out if you do. No, nobody follows me. Okay, it's selfies. I'm really good at selfies. I've had selfies with most of you probably. And we're going to play, yes, Rena, we're going to play the leader selfie game. So identify, yes, Rena, I am the king. So who is this leader?
Dan.
Dan, yes. No prize, but you're
Well,
right.
somebody decided to crack
Welcome,
on the
Tatiana.
soft out of
Please,
the door,
please
and the
mute
thing got
yourself.
stuck. And so when I pulled on the drawer.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Welcome to play the leadership selfie game. So Dr. Mathayan Dan is our medical affairs leader. He's done a lot of work with us, empowering Connie and Laura to lead us in our Fraser Health Wellness, physician wellness journey. He supported a lot of the QI work that we've done and supported me throughout my leadership training with Sauder School of Business and stuff like that. He does a lot of what he can to empower other people. Can you name this leader?
Josephine.
That's
Nice.
That's Josephine. So Josephine is our volunteer today, and she's one of the leaders in many of the care homes. The care homes who have gone are long-term care homes, which have gone through a lot of strain in the pandemic. She's a coach for the gentle approaches teaching for how to work with some of our elders in our community who really require gentle, compassionate care. That's Josephine there. Can anybody identify this one?
You're so nice there.
That's your dad, right?
Yes, Manju, he's my papa. That's Dr. Don Berwick. So Dr. Don Berwick is one of the leaders of the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, and he's given me a lot of, Rena, you've got to mute yourself. He's given me a lot of advice around leadership. And one of his things that he always says is that everything begins with civility. Everything possible begins with creating safety in dialogue. And I think that really speaks to a trauma-informed approach, creating safety. He also says that all the messages that we want to give as leaders must be given 8 times in 8 ways. He recognizes how porous our communication channels are with those that we lead. And they really are low fidelity. So communicating a message 8 times, 8 ways. He's also a big proponent of servant leadership. Servant leadership, I think, has arisen from some of the religious context of leadership, but it has been secularized, and it can be broken down into many concepts very similar to the compassionate leadership curriculum out of the King's Fund. Listening, empathy, facilitating healing, stewardship, community building, bridging silos as we just did, and commitment to the growth of people. Can you name this one?
Gabor,
Yes, I think that was Manju again. Manju, I think if we had prizes, you'd get a few. So Gabor, he says that trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what has happened to you. And what does that mean? What does that, oh, it wasn't you, Manju, I'm sorry. Maybe it was Nicola. What does this mean to anybody? How do you interpret this? Trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you.
Hey, it's Tatiana. It's how you perceive things that have happened to you.
Yes, thank you. That's Tatiana, right?
Yep.
If I could add, it's Manju here. It's also how you not only perceive, but how you receive it.
Yes, how you perceive it and how you receive it and integrate it into your identity. Yeah.
Some people might have the same trauma, but have different experience.
Yes, so the same objective, potentially objective events in the environment, but a completely different experience and outcome. Thank you. Anybody who know who this one is? This one's a little bit more obscure. No? This is Helen Bevan. She's the leader of transformation in the NHS. And she's spoken about this. She runs a school called the School for Change Agents, which is a free online school. And I took this training 2 years ago. And she speaks about something called old power and new power. And in our system, she says that in the old power, power is held by a few people. Directives are pushed down to people, and is a kind of a command and control, almost military style structure in the health system. Doors are closed, no dialogue is really had. And then all your interactions are generally transactional. I'm here because I need something. You're here because you need something. Whereas new power, power must be held, and new power is actually what is needed for the culture of in 2021. When we're speaking about the complexities, we're speaking about a really strapped system. The visions that leaders try to give to their teams must be co-created visions. It can't be like, oh, I thought of this all in my head by myself, and it's a great idea and it's going to work. I'm going to push this to you. That's no longer acceptable or feasible or effective in 2021. In 2021, leadership and power must be distributed. It's power held by many. It's shared power. It's instead of pushing things down, people must be attracted to the nexus of the infrastructure and want to be a part of it. So it's about engagement. It's about being engaging. And it's about really open discussion and relationships. Really focusing on strong relationships of trust and safety. So again, safety, trust, relationships. If you guys in your current situations, leading in your clinics or in your teams, you have a leadership vision statement. If you feel courageous enough, type what that vision statement might be into the chat box. So currently in my chair as wellness at Surrey Memorial, my mission statement is to create a measurable increase in the wellness of the medical staff. What might yours be? And we don't need to hash it out, but I'm just trying to provoke you to be able to verbalize it. An author that's really become really popular in the past few years, James Clear, he writes in his book, Atomic Habits, that team members might actually really want to fulfill your mission, but you can set goals for yourself, but we often don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems, of our environment, of how our environment was intentionally designed. And our environments of our health system don't only include clinical operations processes, they also include how our cultural systems were designed. What our leaders have been behaving and showing to be the values of our particular system. What stories have they been telling, have the staff and the community been telling about your system? What are the common rituals that you do together that speak of what the culture might be? Are people harshly judged or criticized when they make mistakes? Or is our culture a learning culture? What are the consequences when people violate some of the values? When people act without a sense of safety, without creating a sense of safety? How is that addressed in your culture? And thank you, Manju and Kelly, for offering your visions. I want to be part of those. So we spoke a little bit about trauma and we know that one of the principles of trauma-informed practice is that trauma is relatively ubiquitous. Everybody has some trauma. And I remember Laura Kelly brought up the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences video from Kaiser Permanente's TED Talk a few years ago at our first major wellness powwow. And it was really poignant in recognizing that. And I think this is a continuation of that theme. But there is something called post-traumatic growth. All of us have trauma, but we have the potential for change and growth. Even though things happen to us, they need not define us. And we have our family history, we have the traumas that happen to us, which do things to our physical health. But with the adequate support systems and with people, our leaders, our support teams looking at us with a resiliency informed lens, with a lens of growth and optimism, really believing in our capabilities, we can each grow. And that's often what our team members need of us. And I challenge you to bring up a relationship that is being constrained right now in your leadership journey, where you're struggling with someone and maybe you've under projected their capability for growth. And I challenge you to revisit it, reframe it potentially. definition of psychological trauma is when our coping mechanisms, our coping skills, coping options have been overwhelmed. That's a simple definition of trauma. Life experiences where our coping skills have been overwhelmed. Some of the consequences of major trauma, and this is big T trauma, reduced self-worth. This happened to me, so my self-worth is less. Intense shame, a distrust of teams and of authority, replaying different relationship dynamics, often with violence, kind of self-protective behaviors, a presence of existential pain and resentment towards self or others. Thank you, Ken. So our perspective is that as compassionate leaders is that what happened to you happened, but it doesn't define you. And we can't change the past, but you can control the power and the weight that you give to your past in your life going forward. I think so much of our work in healthcare, these are the messages that we convey to our patients when they feel a lack of hope. And we can do this in our leadership as well. Thank you, Connie, for sharing. Sometimes we get down on ourselves because of some of our own coping strategies that aren't healthy. I myself struggle with food sometimes. I don't always eat the healthiest food. But then we have to reframe and have compassion on ourselves. How might our coping mechanisms have been serving us in those moments? They might be holding us back now, but I think they were serving us. And in that same way, as we look at people who have reacted towards us, maybe in a attacking way or perceived, at least verbally violent way, in a harsh email, maybe they were working or expressing a self-protective thing, something they were trying, it was serving them at that moment. It wasn't out of full malice. It was a reaction. I'd like to finish off by saying that it's so important that we spend some time and recognize our trauma, because if we don't, it's possible that we'll bleed on other people who didn't cut us. Health systems trauma, we often think it looks like this on the left, but often it happens more at tables like that. Some of the health systems trauma that we encounter are absent leadership, because leaders are juggling too many balls or they don't have enough time. Sometimes this can actually trigger memories of childhood neglect almost. Tokenistic engagement. It can trigger traumatic memories of being used and abused. A blameful culture can trigger situations where we were blamed when we were kids when it wasn't our fault. Bullying can trigger a sense of people using power against us to cross into our boundaries. Being left behind or invisible is again, maybe some triggering neglect trauma. Number 7, inauthentic leadership. So many of those of us with trauma, we become really attuned to inauthenticity, because when we trusted people before, we were really hurt. So we're looking really hard actually for authenticity in our leaders. And a gossiping culture, it triggers trauma of social exclusion and social pain. And that one is actually really, really prominent in our medical community. Generally, a traumatized community requires a lot of authentic dialogue in order to build trust and safety. In many cases, especially in governance boards, interventions need to be had with communication mediators as soon as possible. As we become tired, and if we're not taking adequate care of ourselves, exhausted leadership can sometimes look like this. We can actually become blame throwers, whereas leaders were blaming administrators or blaming authority blaming the health minister, blaming doctors, blaming patients. And these two actions, gossiping and blaming, have been identified by the King's Fund to be the most corrosive behaviors towards compassionate cultures. Dr. Dan Siegel has a concept called the window of tolerance. The window of tolerance being this is where you perform your best, and you can be triggered into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And trauma can actually decrease that window of tolerance, that optimal performance level window, and make one more reactive. Sujatha, can you tell us a bit about psychological danger and safety?
Yeah, so this is a slide reflecting on behavioral neuropsychiatry and organizational science. And they've taught us that in a strapped resource constraint system like ours, our only chance of sustainability and survival is through innovation. Whether the teams are in a state of fear or safety, this will influence how teams innovate. So fear and high stress that's not regulated has been shown to cause team members to innovate with constraints on their thinking. Safety, on the other hand, will often unlock lateral thinking and accelerate our innovation. The safety allows the communal recognition and setting aside of biases. Bringing unconscious bias to the conscious and removing these barriers provides, a thriving environment for these new innovations. Go to the next slide. So the previous slide that Lawrence was talking about, that window of tolerance, we have to learn or practice widening that tolerance to improve our optimal functioning state. So it could be through mindful self-compassion to build capacity and growth. And with that helps us with the practice of co-regulation. This will build resilience and allow us to sustain other compassions. So a nice example is as infants, we require a nurturing environment to assist us in modulating our reactions to distress, whether it's physical or emotional, like hunger, pain, loneliness. The nurturing scaffold that's provided by our parents or guardian is the compassionate infrastructure that assists us in developing these self-regulating skills, or I sometimes call it self-soothing. If my children start fighting, I try to help them modulate talking to each other, and so I call it self-soothing. But these skills help us to experience and reinterpret our distressing situations in a new, potentially more adaptive way. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to segue to mentorship, as it likely relates to our experience with compassionate leadership. Think for a moment about a mentor that was a positive influence for you. He or she provided a compassionate infrastructure from which you thrived. The good mentors did not hold our hands, but they were calm and they provided a psychologically safe environment. They embraced vulnerability and likely recognized that vulnerability is a place from where learning starts. The best mentors accept us where we're at and collaborate with us in our learning journeys. Next slide, please. So I invite everyone to take a moment and think of the qualities of a compassionate leader. Please don't be shy. Enter your thoughts again into the chat box. Yeah, nice. Kindness, communicator, acceptance, listens, open-minded, hears your concerns, doesn't brush them off. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, Lawrence.
Thank you. With the foundation of self-compassion, there are 4 key behaviors to generate virtuous cycles of compassion within our families and within our workplaces. The first core behavior is choosing to be present, attending. The second is empathizing. And in that empathizing, understanding, aiming for understanding. Compassionate leaders bring the intent to listen and to feel and to understand. They listen only often to understand and not to reload, and not always to give advice. And with compassion, built into compassion is that desire to help. That's what differentiates compassion from empathy. Compassionate leadership's fourth core behavior is taking intelligent action to help. And in our complex systems, that means a team-based action often, because team-based actions are much more sustainable. They include redundancy within them. In empowering others in a shared vision of what's possible, distributed leadership in a team aligned in its values of high quality care. That's often the most intelligent, compassionate action for a often suffering health system. I like what your husband says, seek first to understand rather than be understood. I think there's a song about that. Attributed to St. Francis, I think, but I think it wasn't really him. Sujatha.
Oh, yeah, so this slide is a list of the attributes of a compassionate leader from the King's Fund. So I didn't really know about the King's Fund until I met Lawrence. So the King's Fund is an independent charitable organization working to improve health and care in England. And you know what strikes me again and again when we're looking at compassionate leadership, if you look at the last one, most importantly, self-compassion, self-care. This is the foundation. And you know, self-care arises from self-compassion, and then self-compassion sustains compassionate leadership. It creates that psychological safety that we were kind of talking about: honesty, communication, listening. I mean, all of those attributes come from being compassionate. And you know, when we're able to communicate authentically about our needs and our situation, it increases our efficiency and effectiveness of interactions, getting to the root cause of the issue. Next slide, please. So some of the things that you listed are called, you know, emotional contagions. You know, we're all called to lead from wherever we are in the health system. This is possible because leadership begins with how you lead yourself. You have impact. You are an influencer. Your words and behaviors and your being can be contagious. As a powerful node in a network of empathetic beings, your emotions can go viral. We are all, in fact, interdependent leaders of our health system. So the examples of emotional contagions, whether they're conscious or unconscious, are acts of sharing our emotions, whether it be verbal or even physical expressions. So for example, projecting being happy or calm, opening up our arms instead of crossing them, validating, attuning, being open-minded. Basically, what I want to say is compassion is contagious. You know, people are looking for adult co-regulators. That's what we can bring to the table. And you know, how can we cultivate the ability to be co-regular? It's practice. You know, with every human, we have the ability to forge relationships of trust and building rapport. I mean, many of us do that on teams with our patients. This is the basis of what we bring to the table with compassionate leadership. Next slide, please. And so when we bring that compassionate leadership to the table, our goal is to attain this like circle of life, a virtuous cycle of compassion, because this is a healthy culture in which we can thrive. It allows us to absorb, ebb, and flow the energy from this virtuous cycle of compassion. I know sometimes we encounter negative emotions or words, and if we're able to kind of name that contagion, reframe it, allow it to pass, we don't absorb the energy. And I know, understandably, this is easier said than done, but practicing this skill will allow us to attain that self-compassion, which will further our goal of virtuous cycles. And it's definitely not about perfectionism. I think that's something that I sometimes kind of tell myself, you know, I'm not striving for perfection. I'm striving for, you know, an understanding, humanity. Next slide, please. So let's put our words into action. I really like this this cartoon picture because, you know, it really shows, you know, compassionate leadership in action. You know, the when there's storms. So the storm is, we come into a board meeting, a patient encounter, our partner has a concern, maybe my child is upset, but it meets our calm, and we provide that co-regulation. You know, some of the things we do, we sit down, we create a safe space, listening, allow for authentic communication, naming the emotions. Yeah, some of them are going to be really crappy, but I think we have to validate and attune to that. Help to reframe it, giving choice, and even apologizing for the suffering. Next slide, please. So just briefly as a reminder of what an exercise we did earlier about raising awareness about self-compassion within ourselves. Michael West, he's the head of the thought leadership at the King's Fund in England, and says that compassionate leaders take time for themselves. They ensure that they maintain their compassion energy, intentionally preserve their empathy through some form of meditative or mindfulness practice. Compassionate leaders are kind to themselves. And then he this really stuck with me, and this is why we did that exercise in the beginning. So when things go well, or when they fail, they treat themselves as a good friend might. And I think if we keep that into perspective, when something doesn't go well, what would I tell my friend? I mean, we definitely become more kind. And I think it's a nice skill to practice. On this slide is a work on self-compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff. She talks about 3 parts of self-compassion practice. 1 is self-kindness instead of self-judgment. 2, common humanity, recognizing that we're not alone in our experiences of shortcomings. And number 3, mindfulness, being aware, receptive, and acceptant versus being over-identifying with thoughts or feelings. Next slide, please. And then this is a small little tribute to meditation, and you can practice this very quick and short. It's called metta meditation. I find that it helps me with self-compassion and compassion in general. And even just saying this will make you feel good. So, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, may you be well, may you be free from suffering. And so we're really trying to, be in the present. You don't have to be super positive. You don't have to be super negative. Just be in the present. When we're self-compassionate, we bring opportunity for change, innovation, and allow synergy with energy of others. Compassionate leadership doesn't drain one's energy. Rather, when you're able to connect with others or other leaders, it really does generate the positive emotional contagions. And then this creates and sustains that virtuous cycle that we showed you before. And it helps healing. It helps, we won't be able to know what everybody's traumas are, but, inadvertently, we're bringing something to the situation, and it helps healing for everybody, and it promotes thriving. There are some arguments against self-compassion, like I need to be harsh to myself to maintain my performance. But as I showed the book before, Dr. Neff's research shows this to be a fallacy, that the harshness towards the self is just not a predictor of success or performance. And then another thing as a reminder, self-compassion is not soft, it can be fierce, as in the compassionately assertive communication of boundaries about one's schedule, one's courage of declining to attend a meeting, and one's choice to take a few hours off of work for self-care. This is fierce self-compassion. I kind of think about, be honest to yourself. Only you know yourself the best. Next slide. And then, so this is my last slide. Lastly, I'd like to share a powerful reminder for me about self-compassion. As a child, I grew up looking at a picture of this Hindu monk near my father's desk at home. I didn't really know who he was, but he would frequently quote him. And this is one of the quotes that kind of sticks. His name is Swami Vivekananda. He's a Hindu monk and philosopher. And I find this quote really revealing about how to attain inner peace. Talking to oneself daily is essential, but doing so with compassion builds the resilience, repels negativity, and helps one focus on positive aspirations. What you think directly influences how you feel and how you behave. Our inner dialogue is so powerful, and I guess, It's just a gentle reminder that it's okay to talk to yourself nicely. So now I'm going to pass it to Alan, and he's going to guide us through some exercises. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sujata, for your kindness, and Lawrence for demonstrating your predisposition to compassion and to modeling self-compassion. So we're going to invite you to play a game this time, and I'm going to share my slides here just for guidance. And this game is actually an attempt. This is kind of an experiment, an attempt to combine active listening, the exercise of self-compassion with a partner. That's why we call it assisted self-compassion exercise. And we hope that this exercise will help us not only remember the 3 elements of self-compassion that Sujata cited about Kristin Neff's work, but it also will allow us to try it out by playing a game, an improv game, where we will imagine ourselves to meet our future self, and then doing some kind of a sci-fi conversation. Have fun doing this. Try to imagine what it would look like to practice those 3 elements. So again, the 3 elements are self-kindness, listening to self mindfully without judgment, and recognizing our common humanity. And I would like to frame this as recognizing our shared pains. So we will meet our future self, and this is an improv game we invented. How would you treat your future self with kindness? How would you listen mindfully without judgment to your future self? And how would you recognize your common humanity and shared pains? So that's the same. So this is the story. You accidentally time traveled to the year 2026. Hopefully the pandemic is over, so no social distancing with yourself and stuff like that. And because of a Zoom meeting quantum fluctuation, this is a real thing, right? Caused by the breakout room function. And I think Josephine knows this technology. Maybe she's transported part of her DJ work. Some kind of fluctuation happened that disturbed the space-time continuum. It created a wormhole that caused you to meet yourself in the future. Oh, how about that? So now you have an opportunity to actually practice self-compassion, the 3 elements, in a conversation. So it doesn't matter who the storyteller will be. First, volunteer to be the storyteller, and you're meeting yourself anyway, so it doesn't matter who's who, right? Just be consistent. You're the storyteller telling a story about yourself. You can start with the future self, the one from the future, and then the one from the present is listening. You're listening to yourself, of course, and you're listening to understand and reflect back to the speaker, your future self. Do not problem solve. Just understand, exercise mindful listening. So what you will listen for are 3 things. What are the facts? What are the facts that you're hearing from the storyteller as they see them? How are they feeling, the emotions? And what are the important things the speaker is signaling by telling this story? So just those 3 things. And you don't have to worry about mixing them up and stuff like that. The job of the listener is just to listen and notice those elements, just observe mindful listening. And then after the storytelling and the storytelling and listening is done, we'll do this for 8 minutes in the breakout room. And that's where the time travel will happen, as we are sent to the breakout room. And after that first 8 minutes of listening, you will then debrief. you're like coaching yourself as a listener. Share your thoughts on the experience of listening. And in this case, instead of evaluating how the listening went, we will focus on practicing common humanity. So this is after the listening, you're stepping back and saying, what did I hear? What elements of the story was familiar to me as a listener? Did I experience anything similar to what the storyteller told me in the story shared? And then after that, another 2 minutes, the storyteller will offer some feedback. 2 things the listener did well in showing kindness and compassion. So you will notice the kindness and compassion demonstrated by the listener. And this is the storyteller sharing the feedback from the experience. So this is our plan, 8 minutes, 4 minutes, and then after that we will switch. So total of 24 minutes. That's our hope. And then we'll come back and have an opportunity to debrief in plenary. So that's our plan. Would you like a demonstration or you're good to go? You know exactly what you'll do. And don't worry about making mistakes. Improv is about offering a gift, building on that gift, and let the conversation roll.
And I'm
Any
not allowed.
suggestions?
I'm not allowed to give advice.
You're not allowed to give advice. Do not problem solve. Just listen. And that's exactly what Kristin Neff is telling us in the 3 elements of self-compassion, right? So we're going to practice that exactly.
This is Manju. Just to clarify, are we speaking this, looking at another dyad member as though that person is our future self?
Thanks for that question. So I know that this will come up, and I'm glad that you did not ask the time traveling paradox question. If you meet your future self, would that disturb the the continuum of instead of answering your question, Manju, it's okay. What our hope is to use this opportunity as a way to practice both listening and self-compassion at the same time. So I know that there will be like both metaphysical and philosophical implications to having a conversation like this. We can do that in another improv game, but for this game in particular, if it's okay, we will focus on the exercise of listening. We will, I mean, if there are like elements and complications to the story, it's fine. I mean, we can even include that in the conversation, but our focus will be in the listening and then the feedback, debrief afterwards. Does that make sense, Manju?
I guess.
Oh yeah, please follow up. If,
we can just learn by doing. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. It's an improv game, so let the conversation flow. Try to remember the guidelines, and if you stumble a little bit, it's fine. Just do it again, and things will flow after that. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're good to go. And I will and Josephine, I will work with you with the time. As soon as you send all the participants in pairs, there will be 2 of them in the breakout room, then the time travel will begin, and the 8 minutes will also start. So if we're ready, there are no more questions, then Josephine, please send us to the future.
All right, hold on to your hats. Ah. Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
We're,
Ceremonies in there.
Yeah, we're a little behind on time, but I think it's okay.
Okay. I am. Oh, I gotta pause.
I didn't know that DJing and like Zoom breakouts can do this.
I'm scratching.
I was,
So
yeah, thank you, Alan. What did you want to say, Alan?
I was thinking, could we do like a quick invitation to 3 volunteers, what they thought about, what they learned about that experience in relation to learning self-compassion and practicing self-compassion. It doesn't have to be like perfectly fitting there, but just invitation to share your thoughts. If we have time, by the way,
Yes,
before I turn it back to Lawrence.
we are over time, but anybody's welcome to leave and come as they go. But yeah,
Oh.
I would love to hear some feedback. So
Can I give some feedback? I think it's an excellent thing that you've done organizing this time warp. I think it's a good role play, and speaking to someone else who is who is not yourself, but who could be your future self is a great exercise. And then just asking open-ended questions. It really helped me to think and think through my options more seriously, perhaps, than I've ever entertained those ideas, you know, about how I can have more self-compassion personally.
Thanks for sharing
And
your thoughts.
what that would look like, because it's one thing. It's not just a feeling, but it's about what does it look like.
Thank you so much for that, Manju. Any other thoughts? And feel free to post it on chat too, if you're more comfortable sharing that through text. Ken, do you want to say something, Ken? Or
You know, I had the pleasure of talking with Connie, and she definitely shares a lot of similar values and expectations, but also brought up two or three ones that I didn't think of or appreciated as much. And so seeing those from a different perspective and increasing my awareness of them had value for me. So yeah, it was a challenging but rewarding exercise. Thank you, Connie.
wonderful. Thank you for that, Ken. And Connie, you wanted to share too? Yeah, please.
I echo that. It was a great experience. Thank you so much for setting that up so wonderfully and giving us this opportunity. It was a very good exercise. Of course, I ended up with the person who has these skills so well developed, you know, the listening and tuning in and reflecting back.
Wonderful.
So I got paired perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's awesome, Connie. Thank you so much. So we have 3 who shared. I know, I mean, if anyone is really excited to share, I mean, you can do that as well. But I will be turning it back to Lawrence and Sujata. Back to you.
thank you. Sujata, did you have anything to add before we go to the closing poll?
I was just going to say, David and I were in a pair, and I felt a lot of really awesome emotional contagions and experienced a little calmness, happiness, and yeah, and it was really nice to meet you, David, and I hope you have an awesome trip in Broadway.
Thank you. So Josephine, we have our exit poll coming up. And as you complete the exit poll, know that after the exit poll, you are free to go and have a wonderful day and evening, but feel free to stay on. Some of us will stay on for just a free-form chat. How are we doing, Josephine, with the poll responses? Ah, there they are. Well, thanks so much. Thank you, everybody, for your time. The poll responses are all shows that we've all generally had a good experience. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much for putting this on. Great job. My problem with these things is always that the people that need to be here are never here.